All right, my name is Dr. Raymond Herrera. I'm Assistant Dean of the Graduate School here at WSU, and I'm also the Director of our McNair Scholars Program. Are there any McNair Scholars? All right. You, Brenda Lease? All right, let's talk afterwards. Okay. All right, I want to hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Lori.
Hi, and welcome. As Dr. H said, I'm Lori Karras. You can see up here on the screen, I'm an associate dean in the graduate school, and I'm also a professor in plant pathology, currently interim chair of plant pathology. So, you know, wearing a number of hats like Dr. H.
Before we get started, I do want to offer some congratulations. It is quite the honor and quite the accomplishment for you to be accepted into a summer research program as an undergraduate. There has been a great push. You're not so sure about that? There's been a great push over the past decade to get more undergraduates involved in research. Okay, and one of the ways that we do that in the United States is to fund grants, both public and private, to ensure that our undergraduates, from all backgrounds and so forth, can participate in undergraduate research. Most of these happening in the summer. Many of these programs are highly competitive. I work with a number of undergraduates throughout the year to get them ready to apply to programs like here now. Not all of them are successful. Okay. So congratulations to you. I just want to offer that to you. And by participating in an REU or a similar program that you're participating this summer with us, you're already ahead of the game when it comes to getting ready for graduate school. Okay, many students will have great transcripts, very high GPAs. Many will have very high GRE scores, but not all students will be able to talk about their research experience as undergraduates when they're applying to graduate school. And you will, so congratulations. All right, so let's get into this. Graduate school. What are we doing? What are we thinking about here? So lots to think about. Okay, very different undertaking, very different enterprise than undergraduate. When you were thinking about going to college, or now you know that's your undergraduate years, what were some of the things you were thinking about? What were some of the things that played into your decision to go to a college? Emory University.
I'm sorry, what?
Okay. First things. All right. Engineering and flow chart. So what did you think of?
Oh, mostly financial and academic requirements.
Financial, academic requirements.
Wasn't a super good position to pick and choose, but
Sure. Okay. So could I afford to get there? Could I get in? Penn State. What about you?
Only the school.
Sorry?
I only thought about the school.
You only thought about this school.
I had decided Penn State pretty much before I
Okay. What went into that decision?
the program.
Program.
Meteorology.
All right. Okay. Cool. All right. What about you, ma'am?
I compared the different engineering programs that were available and which one would help me go farther and be able to explore more than the other.
Sure. So explore the engineering programs at those particular institutions. Well, I must say that's a lot more than most high school seniors consider when they're considering colleges. Things we often hear about are, the football team, the basketball team. I look good in green. It's by the beach. All those really important things we need to consider. But as you might know, as I'm sure you're aware now, picking a graduate school is very, very different. Okay, so the things that might have been important to you in your decision making for your undergraduate college, what have you, they may not factor in as much when you're looking for a graduate school, a graduate program, more specifically. So we're going to talk about some of those things. So we need to think about those things when we're figuring out which schools to go to. But even before that, we need to figure out if we even need to or want to go to graduate school. Okay? So there's a sheet that's been handed out to you. 5 things, 5 reasons for going to graduate school, 5 reasons for not going to graduate school. So go ahead and jot down 5 and 5, and then we'll come back together. If you don't have one, go ahead and take out a clean sheet. All that's on the sheet that I handed out is a copy of that. So,
right on the inside of your folder.
right, inside of your folder.
There's some more.
Oh, here's some more. Awesome. Who needs more? Ooh.
Have the official sheet, right? You can't just fill it out without having the official sheet. You're okay? You're well along. Okay. You okay? Yeah. Anybody else? What we're doing now, you can take the sheet. Coming up with, 5 reasons for going red, 5 reasons for going red. This is how many you can get. You just-
All right. Go ahead and wrap up that thought there. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is go ahead and pair up with your colleague next to you. And compare lists. Why you should know it, why you
Build a network, different knowledge, the title, some experience more. Driving around. It's cool. I guess it's cool fun, but it's also I'm looking for not just time, effort, and money.
All righty. All right, good conversation happening around why we should and why we should not go to graduate school. Let's hear a couple of reasons why. So the trio in the back here, you folks, give us a couple of reasons why we should go to graduate school. Oh, I don't know. Let's save that one. Maybe another reason.
To go or not to go?
To go.
Okay.
You say, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. To go, yes.
You want to increase your potential for a higher salary.
Yes, higher salary, yes, potential for that. Okay, sir. First ed, be a role model, set an example. All right. Maybe another reason we should go. Your parent,
To have a more stabilized job.
have a more stabilized job. Okay, maybe more career options. Well, you folks, reasons to go.
Want to be a professor.
You want to be a professor? Yes, certain occupations require graduate education. Okay, reasons not to go. Okay, Emery, I'm gonna give you another chance. Say it again.
Maybe you need instant income from industry.
I know what you said. Oh, you need instant income. You want that quick money. Yeah, it's another quick money. All right. Reasons we should not go. You have to take Yes, Jeff. But yeah, that's a reason folks choose not to go. How about not knowing what you want to do? Okay, good. You've hit upon many of the major reasons why folks choose not to go. Share a book with you here, a resource, Graduate Admissions Essays from Dr. Don Asher. This is a cool book. The first half of it talks about many of the things that we're talking about today in more detail, more examples. The second half gives actual successful graduate admission essay examples, okay, from folks with different walks of life applying to different types of programs. So I think it's like $14, something like that. Check it out. Sir, can you read for us?
Good reasons to go to grad school. You have a passionate interest in a narrow topic or an unusual combination of topics. You have a vocational interest that carries a graduate degree as credential as an entrance requirement. You want to earn more money than you otherwise would have. You want to ensure continuing career advancement. You seek a richer and more satisfying life. You like to do research. School is easy for you and you like to do it.
Outstanding. Give him a hand. Woo! Well done, sir. Yes, you know, all of those, most of them we hit on. The one that's always been surprising to me is the area around a more rich and satisfying life. And I've looked into this a little bit further. And yes, there are studies out there that indicate that folks who go on and earn advanced degrees, masters, PhDs, and so forth, across different domains in life satisfaction, higher levels, report higher levels at least, than folks who earn high school diplomas or undergrad or bachelor's degrees, excuse me. Okay, including things like relationships, job satisfaction, contributions to society, and so forth. So lots of reasons to go to grad school. There are some very legitimate reasons why you should not go to graduate school. A man here talked about, yeah, if you're not sure what to do yet, probably shouldn't go to grad school. I talk with a lot of seniors in the spring of their senior year that they're graduating. They come into my office and say, hey, Dr. H, I want to go to grad school. I'm like, oh, yeah? Why is that? Oh, I'm not sure what to do next. Whoa, okay. That's not the reason why. A lot of undergraduates, you don't, I'm sure, but a lot of undergraduates will believe that graduate school is just a continuation of undergrad. You're just taking more classes. And once you fulfill those requirements, you have an advanced degree. Not the case, okay? There's a lot that's involved in graduate education, writing large papers like theses and dissertations, okay? Doing your own individual independent research, okay? Original research, presenting at national conferences, okay? And probably one of the more important things is establishing your network and your reputation as a professional academic in your particular field. Okay? All right, so lots of good reasons to go, some legitimate reasons not to go too. Someone mentioned other types of responsibilities that we may have that just might not be the right time. Okay, but after today's presentation, you'll have a real basic understanding of what is required of you and what you should consider, how to organize yourself when you're applying to graduate programs, okay? Whether it's right after your undergrad years or a few years down the road. All right, so let's assume though, all of us in here said, yes, we want to go to grad school. So now what? Then what do we do? So there's three things that we're going to focus on today. Finding the best fit and match. As we opened up with reasons we chose our undergrad institutions are not going to be the same reasons that we're going to be considering when we're choosing a grad school, okay? But there's hundreds of programs out there. How do we choose the 4, the 6, the 8? So folks are applying to 10 and 12 programs. How do we choose those? Okay? Out of the hundreds that are available to us. We'll give you some strategies about how to do that. Next thing, you got to organize yourself. Let's say you're applying to 10 programs. Each of them has at least 5 or 6 distinct pieces to their application. That's a lot to coordinate. You're not only organizing yourself, but you're organizing others. Okay? When you're putting your letters of recommendation together, typically they're requiring 3 letters of recommendation. Okay? So you're organizing those 3 folks to make sure that they're getting your letters in on time. All right. And then finally, committing to applying. I've seen a lot of folks put a lot of time and effort to getting in a really high quality application, but for some reason, don't pull the trigger, okay? Don't end up applying, okay? There's something that's compelling them to not put their, hat in the ring, so to speak. Okay? I want to make clear to you that applying is different than attending. Okay? You can't attend if you what? Don't apply, right? Okay, so let's say, you're going through a rough patch around application time. You're not really sure what's going to be happening for you or where you're going to be pulled in the next few months. That prevents you from applying. Well, what happens if things work out well? Okay, what happens if, you are able to clean things up and move right along? You don't have that choice to attend because you didn't apply. Okay, so applying is very different than attending, but we're going to get into the nuts and bolts about applying. All right, so how do we figure out the best fit match? So many programs, where do we start? Any ideas? Where do we start looking? Sir?
If they have like a program or a field that you're interested in.
Yeah, so how do we figure that out though?
I mean, you can sort of like stalk the professors in the department to see what kind of work they're working on, like just if it's interesting or not.
What's a better word for stop?
Research.
Admire. Follow closely. Admire. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So you have a lot of folks around you who already have a lot of knowledge about graduate. Let's talk with them. Other ways that we can figure out a good fit and match for your grad. Has anyone been to a national conference where they presented their research? About a regional one? Okay. Was there a graduate fair there? Sort of, kind of. Okay. So these large meetings that you're going to be going to very soon, I would imagine, are going to have graduate fairs. Okay. And so they're going to have folks like myself who are staffing tables from their institutions that can talk about graduate. Okay. Just a couple of ways. We're going to get into more specifics about how to find fit and match. So things to consider though. Okay. Training in people is the first one. Very different than choosing a major. You're actually being trained to work with folks. You're an apprentice, okay? Someone's going to take you into their lab or their workspace for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, okay? What is that going to be like? What is that going to entail? Do they have your best interests in mind? Now they, meaning not just the faculty you're going to be working most closely with, but his or her or their colleagues, okay? The staff in that program, your fellow graduate students, postdocs who might be there, all the folks who make up that network of support while you're going to be there. That's really key in figuring out, okay? Training. There's classes for sure, but what else are you doing? What kind of training are you receiving?
Sometimes you can be a TA and you can get trained teaching.
Training and teaching, yep. What else? Hint, you're here doing what this summer? Research, right? That's kind of the hallmark. That's the cornerstone really of graduate education, particularly at the PhD level, right? So, who are they training right now? Who have they trained? Where are their trainees currently employed at? Okay, lots of things to consider. Okay, it's not just the coursework. A lot of the courses are going to sound similar for program to program in terms of the title. Okay, but when you start to dig deep and talk with students who are currently there, with the faculty who are teaching those courses, what is it are you going to be involved in? What are you going to be learning in those classes? Dr. Harris, anything else on training and people?
What I would say is that, in terms of training people, I mean, think about if you're going into a master's, how many years do you think you'd be spending in a master's minimum? Any ideas? 2? Yeah, minimum of 2 years in a master's. How many years for a PhD? Yeah, 4. I mean, 3 is the minimum that if you come out with if you come in with a master's degree. But if you consider master's plus PhD, or just going directly into a PhD program, you're probably going to spend 4 or 5 years. Okay, and so that part about, training in people, you want to identify somebody that you can work with for that period of time. So not just somebody who is the biggest name in the field. That may not be that important. What may be important is somebody who's a really good mentor. And I would say probably, more than anything else, I would put mentorship up, on the top, towards the top of the list. Because if you're working with somebody who is not, they may be one of the big names in that particular field, but if they're a lousy mentor, you may not make it through the program, right? So, that's where this research comes in, talking to people. It's not just identifying somebody whose name shows up all the time, it's talking to who they've trained and getting some idea of what it would be like to work with this particular person.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so training in people. We have cost and location. Let's say you found the most perfect program, but lots and lots, and you're not sure you want to spend the next 4 years in Alaska. Or maybe you do. But other things to consider for sure. As STEM students, cost should not be an issue for you, okay? Particularly if you're applying to PhD programs. Lots of funding for graduate education for graduate students in STEM. Okay. The price tags will be different from school to school. So cost is not just can I cover the cost of tuition and so forth, but can I live there? Okay. Many of the funding packages that you'll be receiving, or at least offers of, from the various programs that you'll be applying to, are probably going to be very similar in terms of amount, dollar amount. Okay, but what's the difference? Okay, let's say that one program is at NYU, okay, located in New York City, and then the other program is located in beautiful Pullman, Washington. Where do you think your dollars going to go? Okay. All right, things to consider. A lot of times, students, they're really enamored with the name branding that happens. Okay, I got into Yale. All right, but can you afford to be at Yale? Maybe you can, and that's awesome. We'll talk about funding options towards the end here, but just something to consider for sure. Okay, and then also with kind of the Yale level schools, back to the mentoring. I had a friend who went to Columbia, and she was so excited to work with one of the faculty there in her program. One of the top names in the field. She saw him 4 times during her 6 years in the program. Okay, he's a top name, which means he goes to speak at a lot of conferences. He's asked to be in a lot of different boards. He's on and on and on, okay? And so, fairly sought after. And so he didn't have a lot of time to work with the graduate students. And finally, admissibility. Can I be admitted? In Dr. Asher's book, he talks about 3 zones you should be applying to. Okay, that's safety zone. Okay, that's those schools or those programs you have very high levels of confidence that you'll be getting into that program. Okay, oftentimes those schools will have a direction or 2 directions in the name: southeastern, whatever, north central, something. Okay. Those should be a zone on your list, okay? And then the next level he refers to as the solid level, okay? Those programs that have a really good reputation, who produce very good scientists and so forth, and have pretty good funding for their students, okay, throughout their time doing the program. Okay, and then the final zone is, he calls it different things. Points in the book, which school, dream school, what have you. But you should be applying to those schools as well. schools that you think, well, I really want to go here. I don't know if I have too much of a shot to get in, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. A lot of students that we've worked with over the years have gotten into dream schools with full funding. And it's just hard to predict application outcomes from year to year because there's so many things that change from year to year. You know? Sometimes from year to year, requirements may change. From year to year, who's sitting on the selection committees may change. From year to year, how many they're accepting into a program may change. So you just never know. Okay? So you owe it to yourself. You've worked hard enough. You know, at this point, you've put together a very solid application package. So you should be applying to a dream school or two of your choice. All right, questions about these three areas so far?
Just want to add something on the admissibility. So, and this comes from, so in my department, so I'm, as I said, I'm in plant pathology, and I spent about a decade as the graduate coordinator. So that's the person who goes through all the applications. And you know, the one thing I'll tell you is that most of the students who apply to plant pathology don't get admitted. And that's not because they don't have a high enough GPA or we don't even require the GRE. The reason they don't get admitted is because they're not a good fit for their interests and the interests of a faculty in our department, okay? So it may not be, if you don't get admitted, it may not have anything to do with your qualifications. It may be your interests aren't a good match, because go back to that training in people. So for example, I'm a mycologist, I study fungi. And if somebody is applying to the department and says that they really want to study viruses, and I'm looking for a student, I automatically, you know, put that application in the pile I'm not interested in, because they've said they're interested in viruses. I'm interested in fungi. Okay, so, and even if somebody does apply who says that they're interested in fungi, and I don't have a space in my lab, or I don't have funding for that student, I can't admit them. So there's a lot of reasons why, you know, admissibility, and it's very different at the graduate level than it is at the undergraduate level, where it's largely based on your qualifications and your experience and your background, you know, et cetera. At the graduate level, it increasingly becomes this good fit, you know, so you have to have an interest and the experience, the right background for someone in that program who is going to take you on as their mentee. Okay? So don't get discouraged, is what I'm saying. When you apply to these different types of schools, don't get discouraged or take it personal if you don't get admitted, because it may just be your timing. You know, so maybe if you could reapply in 2 years, then that person that you're interested in working with might have funding, might have a position in his or her lab.
Okay, so Dr. Karras and I were talking about how could we best make a visual for you to sum this section up, and it would look something like this. So training in people, for sure, you know, that's kind of key. I think that's probably the most important. Admissibility, can I get in? And then finally, cost and location. So we're going for that sweet spot there, right? Okay. So you might get 2 out of 3, and that's close. That might be on your list, but we're really going for those programs where you're getting 3 out of 3. Questions?
Any questions?
Sir.
Is there like a website we can look at all the programs available?
Is there a website we can look at? There's a few websites, and we're going to show you a few. Every school who offers graduate programs will have a listing of those programs. We'll show you ours a little bit later. But even to get to those, because that could take forever. You know, that's hundreds of schools. You're not going to go through every school. But we'll give you some tips on how to how to get closer to that list of programs for you. All right, so that's actually next. So, and this part.
So how do you find those programs? And so one thing, well, we've got a number of suggestions up here. One is faculty mentors. And so you're all working with somebody this summer. And you're working with faculty, but you're also working with postdocs and you're working with graduate students. And so you already have some great resources to start talking to. Now they may not be in the area that you're interested in, right? I mean, you may, well, I took this REU because that's what's available, but my area is over here. I'm interested in something else, but don't discount their knowledge and experience. And, great question is to ask them, how did you, for the postdocs or for the graduate students or even the faculty, how did you decide where you were going to go? What was that process like? There are lists from professional associations, and did you put the example up there? Okay, so one example so as I said, I'm a plant pathologist, and so my professional society is called the American Phytopathological Society. And, on that website, there is a list of over 50 different universities that have graduate programs in plant pathology. Okay, and you can find that, and actually it's quite easy if you looked up a Google search, surprisingly, or not surprisingly. So if you looked up graduate programs in plant pathology, all right, then that would come up at the top of the top hit. And then you go in there and then you see this list of graduate programs. A word of caution is that what you'll see if you look down that list of all of these different universities around the country that offer programs in plant pathology, you may not see plant pathology in the name. You may see botany, you may see biology, you may see plant sciences. And so you have to be careful in getting that list of programs, those institutions and programs, because the specific area that you're interested in, it may not be reflected in the program name or the department name, all right? So Google searches work great, but you got to have a little bit of background knowledge about how to use them. All right, I said current postdocs and graduate students, so again, with the faculty mentors, keep in mind the graduate students have just gone through this process. So, and the postdocs have gone through it not so long ago. So ask them, how did you decide where you were going to go? Grad fairs. So there are grad fairs that are associated with these conferences. As Dr. H said, regional, national conferences. So that's where grad schools, people like us go out and we have tables and we have flyers. In fact, the information that we have in those, in your note, in the folders, that's the type of information that we make available. And there was a question like, is there a list of all the grad programs available? Well, on the back of the first page, we have a list of all the graduate programs that we have available. And that's also available online. You go on to the graduate school website and you'll see off to the left it says degrees, and you'll pull up this list, but in this case, you can click on it and then it'll take you in where you can go in and get a lot more information on that particular program. You'll find out, the requirements for the program, for applying for the program. You'll find out all the faculty that are in the program and their research areas. You'll have contact information. So I think most universities have something equivalent to a graduate school, maybe called something slightly different, and they'll make that information available to you. I've already mentioned Google. Google is great for finding information, but you need to, again, have a little bit of information knowledge in order to use it effectively. Invited lists or invited visits to campuses. This is great. I mean, actually, in a sense, that's what you're doing right now. You're kind of looking WSU over, right? Except you have a whole summer to do it. But for many of our programs on campus, particularly in STEM, when a student applies, if the program's interested in that student or potentially interested, they may invite that student in for a campus visit. And usually they're paying the cost for that campus visit. the graduate school, we have a campus visitation program for students called the Campus Visitation for Diverse Scholars. And so, you know, if you're fortunate enough to be one of those students that has invited in for a campus visit, what a great opportunity. I hope you will take that opportunity, because you might be surprised. It may not be one of your top schools, and then you go in for a visit and then you realize this just feels right. So there's other places that you can go. How many of you are familiar with gradschools.com? Look it up. I mean, it's a great source of information. Petersons.com. You know, there's places like that that make it really easy for you to find information on grad schools. Okay. All right, so you found your programs. What next?
All right, now time to get organized. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, lots of distinct pieces for each of these applications. Okay, so let's talk about the first one, statement of purpose. Okay, different than a personal statement. Okay, as the names suggest, what do you think the difference is? Personal statement versus statement of purpose. Sir.
Personal statement is who you are. Statement of purpose is what you want to do.
Yes, yes. So personal statement often used for things like scholarships at the undergraduate level and so forth. Really, your personal history, how you got to where you are today. Okay. Statement of purpose, there's a little bit of that. It's more about what you want to do immediately, get into grad school, and long term, what you plan to do with your PhD. Okay. That last piece is where most students fall short. They're really good about telling the story. They're pretty good about why that program's a good fit. They're not so good at telling the reader why they want to get a PhD and what they plan to do with it afterwards, career-wise, influence-wise, okay, societally, okay? So that last piece is key. What does that last piece tell the committee? It tells them you have some vision. Okay? It tells them you have a plan, okay? Your goal is just not to get into graduate school, but to be successful there, graduate, and move on, you know, into the larger world of work, world of research, and so forth, okay? So statement of purpose is key. It's the piece that you can spend the most time on, have the most control over at the time you are applying, okay? Lots of eyes should look at your statement of purpose, okay? Many, many drafts, okay? 10 plus, okay, at least, okay? This is a working document. You're going to modify it for each of the programs you're applying to, okay? So you'll write one original statement of purpose, and then you'll write 8, 9 different versions of that particular statement, okay? Letters of recommendation. Faculty, listen to the faculty. Okay? This can be something that undergraduates who are moving into graduate school don't really get a grasp of until it's too late. Okay? I want you to know now, faculty, listen to faculty, particularly when it comes to making decisions around who to let into their grad program, okay? Faculty that you have chosen and they've accepted to write your letter of rec are vouching for you. They're essentially saying, yes, she's a great candidate. I would admit her into my program. Yes, he's a hard worker. He follows through on all his commitments. Yes, they will be successful in your program. Okay, really important to figure out who is going to write your letters of rec. Okay? It shouldn't be someone that you have a casual acquaintance with, maybe you've taken just one class from, and so forth, okay? Because that faculty is not going to tell them much more than what they can read on the transcript. They could say, you know, they sat in the front of the class and they got an A. Well, see that on the transcript that they got an A, okay? So it should be someone that you have a real close working relationship with, someone who can vouch for you that you'll be successful at the graduate level. All of you have at least one letter of recommendation writer in your toolbox right now? Who might that be? Hint, you're here, doing research, somebody. Okay, the PI in your lab, whoever brought you here. Okay, whoever accepted you into their lab for the summer, the worst place for the summer. Okay, that is someone who would be an excellent letter writer for you. Right. Next, GRE test scores. Hi, she wakes up. Okay, GRE. Once upon a time, long ago, it used to be the cutoff, the gold standard to get into grad school. You didn't have a certain score, you were out. Couldn't get in. That's no longer the case. And that's no longer the case for a number of reasons. First and foremost, there's research that indicates that the GRE is not a good predictor of success at the graduate level. So why do we keep taking it? Why do you think we keep taking it?
Credential inflation.
Say it again?
Credential inflation.
Credential inflation? Well, maybe. But it's on that vein of things, okay? It's a tradition. It's a tradition, and in higher education, they're big on tradition. We've done it. That's all. We're going to do it again. Okay. It's big business. Okay. How much does it cost to take a GRE? Anyone know? Over $200. Times thousands of people taking it every year. It's not going to go away anytime soon. They got lobbyists. Okay. They're going to keep it there for a while. Okay, but understand this, over the last few years, many programs have not required the GRE. There are certain programs on our campus that don't require it anymore. Okay, there are some, and actually probably most that still do. But it's getting closer to that 50% mark. Okay, how they use it is different. Okay? At one time, like I said, you didn't have a particular score, they didn't consider it. Now they're looking at the scores in totality with the rest of the application. Okay, they're looking at the applications holistically. Okay, what did you say in your statement of purpose? What do your letter writers say about it? What are your grades like? And what are your scores? So the GRE, yes, it's still around. It's still most applications a necessary piece to the application. But understand that it's just one piece. You have 5 other pieces, 6 other pieces, that are going to be considered in your profile when you're applying to particular programs. Now, with that said, I suggest you prepare well and get yourself a low-cost, if not free, book or some other type of material online to prepare for the GRE. I've looked at almost all of them. And I can tell you with certainty, I'm actually in the middle of doing a GRE prep here this summer for our McNair scholars here on campus. They're all about the same, okay, in terms of what they offer. Okay, given the presence of online materials now, they offer short little videos. Okay, but if you buy the book, you get a code to your own little account online. You get a little CD. So there's videos there too. So they all offer pretty much the same thing. They'll give you a couple practice tests. They'll give you some type of quizzes to take. They'll give you some type of videos to watch to explain question types, answer types. Okay, you'll do some drills that are timed and so forth. A lot of it is just really about being familiar with the actual exam. So when test time comes, you're not freaked out. Okay, you know what section's coming first, what sections could be coming second, okay, and third and so forth. You know how much time you have to write. You know how much time you have to answer math questions and so forth. All right, so a lot of it is just becoming real familiar and also building up your test taking stamina, right? GRE is just a test. Prepare well, take it, and move on. Transcripts, just pretty basic. You can't really do anything with transcripts other than send them. at the time of you that you're applying. Now, cool thing about transcripts over the last 2 or 3 years, they're not requiring, most schools are not requiring you to send official transcripts initially. So that's a cost savings. Okay? For most schools, they do charge to send official transcripts to other institutions. But now what a lot of programs are doing is letting you send unofficial transcripts. And those are free. If you get into the program, and then they'll ask for the official transcript. But there was a time when you had to buy all of them ahead of time, send them out and so forth. And that was quite a bit of money. Sir? Do some programs require interviews? Yes, they do. More and more programs, actually. And not just in the liberal arts and social sciences, but in STEM as well. Okay. Yeah, we're not talking about.
And some are doing. So we use, the application system that we use is CollegeNet, and CollegeNet offers an interview online. So I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of that, because what that is then is that there are several pre-recorded questions, and then you, as the applicant, are answering those questions, and at least the iteration of it now, there's no do-overs. So you want to make sure that you're prepared. That, and I don't know if the only option is like a video option, but think about how you look. If it's a video option, because you don't want to send the wrong message, but be aware that you may only have one shot at answering those questions. And so really, what they're looking for is how can this person think on his or her feet and responding to these questions and so forth.
Then the last piece is to create an account for each application. Okay, the applications are online, like any account you will create online. You'll ask for a user, passcode, and so forth. So that will be your portal for that application. Questions? Okay, cost. How much do they cost? Not free. Anyone have any ideas? $75 for your guess. Oh, stretch. Yeah, it's around $75 to $100, $125. That's kind of the high end that I see. If you can get a waiver, by all means do so. You might have to ask around. On some of the grad school websites, it'll talk about who to contact for a waiver. You may be eligible for a waiver and so forth. As participants of a summer research program here at WSU, summer 2018, Dr. Harris and I are providing you all with waivers. So email us. We'll give you our information at the end. We'll provide you with that information, and you'll get a link from us. It'll be a special end around of the application, so it bypasses the page where you need to pay. Questions? Usually there's some excitement and woohoos about this. All right, so how do I pay for this? I'm going to hand over the money talk.
All right, so this is the really good part, because it's like this secret. I was the first in my family to go to graduate school, and there weren't many of us that had even gone to college. And I felt kind of like I stumbled into graduate school when I found out I was getting offered an assistantship. So everything was getting paid for. It's like, what? Why didn't anybody tell me this? This is like the secret. So what we want to do is make it so it's not a secret. You may all know this, okay? Because I think maybe students are a lot more sophisticated now. But our experience from going out and talking with different groups of students is that there is still some confusion, misunderstanding about how to pay for graduate school. If you are planning to go into a PhD program in a STEM field, you should be able to have that funded, okay? Now, masters, maybe not. Not all programs, not all programs will fund their master's students. But certainly at the PhD level, you should be able to fund your education. So a full funding package, and this is an assistantship. So when we're talking about a full funding package, here we're talking about an assistantship. Now there's different types of assistantships. I think earlier it was mentioned a teaching assistantship or getting teaching experience. So a teaching assistantship or a TA, you probably all had TAs, right, in your, who've either handled labs or taught classes. So those are graduate students that are getting paid to teach. There are research assistantships. And in STEM, research assistantships are a lot more common than they are in non-STEM fields. So I paid for my entire education through research assistantships, master's and PhD, all right? There's also other types of assistantships. We have what are called grad assistantships, or sometimes they're called staff assistantships. So a little less common for students in STEM because typically you'll be able to get an RA or a TA, but for many of the students here on campus, they're funding themselves by working in different offices on campus, including the grad school. We have several graduate students that are working with us now and doing different tasks. Okay, so what those assistantships can include, not all include all of this, but a full funding package will provide you with a stipend. That's what you're going to live on. That's what you're going to pay your rent, buy your food, etc. All right. Typically, an assistantship is what we call a half-time assistantship, meaning that you're required to work 20 hours a week. Those 20 hours a week, if you're on a teaching assistantship, you're spending 20 hours a week doing something related to teaching. You might be grading papers, you might be handling a lab section, you might actually be running the entire class. If you're on a research assistantship, you're doing some kind of research. So that's the salary. We call it a stipend. So if somebody refers to a stipend, that's what you're actually getting paid. Our students who are on assistantships, they get paid just like we do twice a month. Health insurance. So our assistantships at WSU come with health benefits. And so not all assistantships do, so just be aware of that. And when you get your offers from different institutions, these are some things to be looking for in your letter of offer. What's included in this funding package. At WSU, for students who are on assistantships, unless the students come in and they're already a resident of Washington State, they get a non-resident tuition waiver their first year. If they're eligible, they establish Washington residency, and then afterwards they're getting a resident tuition waiver. So that means that the students aren't paying any tuition. They do pay. There are some mandatory fees that are required, but their tuition is covered. There are also scholarships that are available, scholarships that may be available through, the graduate school offers some scholarships, the university has different scholarships, there's external scholarships. Many of our students who are really savvy about this, they're applying for all different types of scholarships and they're adding these on top of their assistantship. And even though the individual scholarships may not be that much, they may be, $1,000, $2,000, they add up. So, scholarships is something you should all be thinking about. You should all be applying for these when you get into graduate school. And, one is, I haven't met a student yet who could use more money. And two, it looks really good on your CV. Okay. So are there questions about this funding package for assistantships? Yes. Where do you find assistantships? Well, typically, so here at WSU, when you apply, when you go through the application process, there's going to be a question of how are you planning to fund your education? And there's no separate application for an assistantship. So you check the box that says assistantship. And then that's the, you're put in to a pool of students who are eligible. And again, when I said that most of the students in my department who apply are not admitted, that's part of it, because all of our students come in with full funding, either from an assistantship, or for some of our students who are international students, they may come in with funding from, say, their government or their institution, all right? But we will only admit those students that either have funding and we have a faculty who's willing to mentor them, or we have funding for that student. So it may be different at different institutions. For the grad assistants, something other than a TA or an RA, the way that you would find those, like I know at WSU, on the graduate school website, we have a place for opportunities where we post assistantships when they're available. Each institution would be somewhat different, but that's a good question. How do you find? Some students think that there's a separate process for assistantships, and there may be. That's one thing you'd want to ask about when you go to apply for an institution. There should be somebody like a graduate coordinator or an academic coordinator who can answer those questions when you go to apply. Is there a separate application for assistantships? Other questions? No, good. Yeah, and that's where I'll come to next. Good question. So the question is, for those of you not here in the room, are there grants? We call those typically fellowships, and that's a good segue into the next section, because there's internal sources of funding, and typically those are the assistantships, and then there's external types of funding, and that's where fellowships. And so this is for the internal type. I've already talked about assistantships, so research called an RA, a teaching assistantship, a graduate assistantship. There might be other types of internal funding. There may be fellowships available internally, within the university. Less common than assistantships. Externally, that's where you would find fellowships. All right, so we've listed a few here, or we've listed two here, excuse me, and then some resources for finding others. So all of you, if you are in STEM or planning to go into STEM, you should be eligible, you may be eligible to apply for the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program, the GRFP. You can find that really easily just by typing in National Science Foundation, NSF GRFP. Now, if you're not already familiar with this, I would encourage all of you to look this up. And this is why, because the National Science Foundation is trying to get students just like you to apply before you ever start graduate school. They want you to apply before you start graduate school. So you can apply your senior year, you can apply after you graduate, if you take a gap year, if you don't go right into a graduate program. But once you're in a graduate program, you're only eligible to apply once. Now, the funding rate for the National Science Foundation GRFP is pretty good. It's 1 in 8. So 1 in 8 students who applies for it will receive it. And you're going to increase your chances of receiving the GRFP if you apply before you start graduate school, because they have lower expectation for you before you start a graduate program. Once you're in a graduate program, they figure you should know what you're going to be doing. So before you start, it's recognized. You might not have that detailed research plan in place. Actually, the process for applying for a GRFP is pretty easy. It's a 3-page personal statement and a 2-page research plan. You also have to have letters of recommendation. but the actual part that you have to provide is pretty short. And if you don't get it the first time you apply, if you apply before you start a graduate program, you get another shot at it once you're in a graduate program. But once you're in a graduate program, you can only apply once within the first 3 semesters. So it doesn't matter, you know, if you're going into a master's program, you're only going to be able to apply once in the first 3 semesters. And so what that means is you either apply, and the applications are due in the fall, they're typically October. So you're either going to apply your very first semester if you start in the fall, or you're going to apply the fall of your second semester, but you only get 1 shot now. It used to be you got 2 shots. You could apply your first semester and your third semester. NSF says they've changed it now, only once you're in a graduate program, and that's because they're really trying to encourage students to apply early. So you apply early, you apply before you get into a graduate program. If you get it, you know, some of those schools, what did you call them, your dream schools? You come with your own funding because it gives you all of the advantages of an assistantship, the full, you know, that full package. It provides you with a stipend, it provides you with a tuition waiver, or it pays your tuition, health benefits, and it pays at a higher level than an assistantship. You have your own funding, and you're going to find those that some of those or many of those dream schools are going to open their doors to you because you're coming in with this highly prestigious funding. So the GRFP, it's 3 years of funding at a higher level. I think last year it was something like $32,000 a year, plus the tuition. It's a cost of education allowance that goes to the institution. You know, so you get paid at a pretty good level, higher than, I think, yeah, any assistantship I'm aware of. So 3 years, which may or may not be enough for you to finish your PhD, but they also allow you some flexibility. Let's say you want to come in and be a TA for the first year. They'll allow you to defer it. So definitely look into the GRFP. For those of you who are eligible to apply this fall, really be thinking about it, okay? And you know, just like with the statement of purpose that Dr. H referred to, you need to put that much effort into your application. Get people to look at it. Both your personal, the personal statement part of it, that 3-page personal statement, and your research statement. Get feedback. You know, I always say start out with somebody you feel comfortable with, and then give it to somebody you're not so comfortable with, like, you know, some of your professors or somebody who's going to be really critical and look at it and give you some good feedback. The Ford Foundation Fellowship Program is similar. It offers some of the similar benefits. Can they apply before they start for Ford? So you can also apply before you start a graduate program. Okay. So the Ford Foundation is broader in terms of discipline. There are eligibility requirements for both of these, and I think is the Ford Foundation restricted to underrepresented students? It's not just students from underrepresented populations. Okay. So look at both of these. You know, you can find these online and look at the eligibility criteria, deadlines, that sort of thing, and you know, really consider doing this. I think you can, even if you're not successful with the fellowship applications, you're much more likely to apply for other things, whether it's scholarships, and you can get scholarships on top of these fellowships. You can't have a fellowship and an assistantship, but you can have scholarships. They're kind of like the icing on the cake, you know, so you've got your full funding and then you get scholarships on top of it. You can find out about different types of fellowships. These are not the only ones, but you can find out about you know, the different types of fellowships that you may be eligible for. Cornell University has a really good fellowship database. It's searchable, as does the gradschools.com info page. All right, so those are some places you can go, because there may be others that you're eligible to apply for. Questions on fellowships?
fellowships limited to U.S. citizens?
I know that the NSF is, so the question is, are the fellowships restricted to US citizens? You would, I think for the NSF, it's US citizens. I'm not sure if it's permanent residents. Do you recall?
Usually the federal funding is for US citizens and permanent residents.
Yeah.
The private foundations typically don't have.
Sorry.
So the federally funded fellowships, typically you need to be a US citizen or permanent resident. With those that are privately funded, like the Ford, I think most of them do not have a citizenship eligibility requirement. So there's a few that are, yeah, best bet is to look at the privately funded. So the Ford, Melanie, and so forth.
And that's actually a good, go back to the assistantship. So there is no, you are eligible for assistantships if you are not a US citizen. So many of our students that are here as graduate students are not US citizens or permanent residents. So that's a difference between like the federally funded fellowships and assistantships. Other questions? Okay, I think then that we're at the end. So this is where, questions on anything that we've presented, maybe what we haven't presented. Any questions that you're left with? Yes.
I didn't get a chance to ask earlier, but is the waiver for the WSU grad school application, is that held good for multiple years?
Yeah, so the question is the application fee waiver that Dr. H mentioned, is it good for the future, right? Yes. So what you'll want to do is get our information. It's here on the next slide. Whoops, no, it's not. We have cards available. So these are, you can contact Dr. Herrera or you can contact me. If you're not here in the room, you can look us up online. We're easy to find. Just send us an email. Make sure you send us an email before you pay. We can't refund your application fee. So you can contact us before you actually start the application, or you can contact us when you're in the application process before you hit that submit button, because once you hit the submit button and it takes you to the payment page, you want to have contacted us before that. So Dr. Herrera is writing our emails up on the board for those of you not present in the room. So it's Raymond, RAYMOND @wsu.edu for Dr. Herrera, and for me it's Carris, CARRIS @wsu.edu. All right, and when you contact us, make sure you say, I was part of the summer REU program, and I'm contacting you about an application fee waiver. All right, so if it's for next year, for fall of 2019, you're going to be applying, maybe applying as early as this fall, right? Anybody familiar with application deadlines? Have you looked that up yet? Yes? What's the application deadline? If you wanted to start a graduate program in fall of 2019, what's the typical application deadline? So December 15th for some programs, correct. It's in some programs, it'll be in like the late year prior to. Typically, it's like January. I think for most of our programs, it's January 10th. All right, so you need to really be planning ahead. So if you're planning to start, if you want to start a graduate program in fall of 2019, you should be working on your applications soon. Other questions? Yes.
How soon can you typically access applications?
Uh,
Like if we were to apply.
Yeah, so the question is how soon can you access applications? And, ours might be live already, but it's either live now or August, because we have, not all of our students will start in the fall. Some students start in the spring, and it depends on the program. Some programs don't do spring admits, so the deadline for, if you wanted to start a program in spring of 2019, which here would be January, then the deadline for that is July. Okay, and so, I guess you can think about your strategy. How early do I want to apply? I mean, there's some advantage in getting it out of the way. They may not look at it until, typically there's, it's after the deadline, and for programs that admit kind of students in groups. That's another point, just kind of the insider's knowledge on graduate programs. Some programs like mine, plant pathology, we have more or less rolling admissions. So it really depends on when somebody has funding for a graduate student. We may even have students who start this summer. Other programs will only do admits in the fall. They bring students in groups. They know how many students they're going to be able to admit. Those programs, often the students come in and they're funded on teaching assistantships. And so they know how many positions they have available. So even if you applied early for those programs, they may not look at your application or review it until they'll do it as a batch. They might have a committee that reviews. Yes, question, Beck. Can you apply earlier than, so the question is, so can you apply if you're a junior? It's probably not to your advantage to apply when you're a junior, because again, and I'm thinking of my program. If your applications will only be held like from one semester, they can only be moved forward several times. Before then, you would just be getting a letter saying you're not admitted. So that's the other thing, is if you're not accepted, if you're not made an offer and you don't get a letter of denial, you may have the option of having your application move forward a semester. So it's highly dependent on the type of program. Now, you might say, why would I want to do that? Well, you might do that because you're really interested in getting into a particular program. They don't have an opening in, say, fall of 2019. They may have an opening in spring of 2020 or fall of 2020. So for many of our applicants, they do ask to have their application held for another semester to be considered. And many of those students, will get admitted if there is funding available. Others, it depends on the department. They may not hold them. They'll just, anybody who isn't made an offer, they'll be sent a letter of denial. Other questions? Yes.
How likely is it for someone to get a TA or RA assistantship?
How likely is it for someone to get a TA or a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship? Some programs are very competitive, and so it's really going to be based on your background, your experience. One of the things I'll tell you is that it's very rare, at least in my discipline, for any student to get admitted if they don't have research experience. It's just required. I mean, I was really fortunate. I had almost 2 years of research experience, and I didn't even know I was going to go to graduate school. I just happened to be able to work in a lab. But that makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference because you've got the people that you've been working for that length of time who are writing you letters. So, you can increase your chances of getting funding by doing what you're doing now. And when you go back to your institutions, pursue other types of opportunities working in labs. So I can't tell you what's the chances. I mean, you know, here at WSU, for most of our students who are admitted, they are admitted with funding into a PhD in STEM. So, you know, it's that, again, that fit. And Dr. H can say something about, you know, for the McNair scholars, how many institutions, how many applications you recommend that students submit.
So as you can imagine, grad school is real competitive. So we suggest our students apply to 10 to 12 programs. And that might sound like a lot, but when you think about creating these application packets, you're creating one original application packet, then modifying that 10 times. Okay? So it might seem daunting. It is work. However, it's really about playing the odds. Okay, you're increasing your chances. Funding for STEM, it's go back to your question. It's pretty high, pretty good odds, I would say. You know, for folks who have research experience or applying directly to a PhD, the students that I work with for that profile, all of them have got funding. If they apply to a PhD program. Now that's the piece that I think psychologically a lot of students have to get over. They think that, oh, I'm going to try it out. I'll try it with a master's first. Well, your master's may end up costing you more than your PhD. Okay, think about that. Okay, your master's may cost you more out of pocket than your PhD. So if a PhD is your ultimate goal, the master's becomes less important. Some would say irrelevant. Okay, it might provide you with additional training and so forth. But a lot of the PhD programs, if you're able to get into them directly, will provide you with an opportunity to earn a master's along the way. So that's a belief a lot of undergraduates hold around moving through graduate education. I'll get started with a master's and then eventually the PhD is already, you know, on your bucket list. I'd say go for it. You know, right from that. Funding, I want to say one more thing about that. For students who are concerned about, oh, my funding is not guaranteed throughout my time, that's pretty rare that actually happens. Okay. You probably be guaranteed funding for the first year, maybe a second year, for some of these other schools and packages and fellowships, maybe a third year. So to get a fully funded, meaning from the time you register to the time you graduate, package right at the onset, it's pretty rare. Okay, there are some programs that are able to do that, but not to worry. Okay, you'll set yourself up for funding for those end years because you'll be at the institution. You'll know the lay of the land. You'll know who has funding, who to go ask about funding, and so it'll work out. I think if you can get 3 years initially, that's pretty good.
I agree. And, you know, this is another thing. You can, again, use the resources that you have available this summer. So there's graduate students, there's postdocs, there's faculty that you're going to be interacting with. And these are some really good questions for them. Ask them, you know, it's like people like to tell their story, you know. So how did you decide to go where you went? How, for the graduate students, how did you decide to come to WSU? You know, what does the funding look like? You know, did you apply to other schools, or, you know, for the postdocs, ask them the same question. You know, it's take advantage of you know, this experience that you've got this summer, which is not just to get research experience. That's a big part of it, but this is your chance to really kind of grow professionally. And you'll be surprised. There's different paths people take to, you know, kind of that end point. Other questions? All right, well, you know how to contact us. We're here on campus. If you want to, if there's something that occurred to you or occurs to you later, you just want to come over, and if you want to set up an appointment to talk with us, you know, feel free to contact us. We'll have our cards available as well. I see Dr. H has got his out, and I'll put mine out there. So on the way out, if you want to grab our cards and tuck it away so that you have that for future reference. But, you know, we hope to see all of you applying to WSU in the future. And good luck this summer. You've got a great opportunity.
All right, thank you.